Alrighty. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our webinar today, Mythbusting Government Procurement. Before beginning, CAMC would like to thank our sponsors, EY, Flexingate, Magna, Nutrien, Prasad Employment Law, and RBC, for sponsoring the Business Intelligence webinar series. These webinars are focused on supplier development, and by sponsoring, CAMC can provide education and skill building assets to our network. First, we'll be hearing from Aaron Ydenberg, the Policy Analyst, Business Engagement, Office of the Small and Medium Enterprises, OSME, and the Public Services and Procurement Canada, PSPC, Pacific Region. Now, before handing the reins off to Aaron, I would like to note that we have all attendees currently muted. However, if you have any questions during the presentation, you can enter them either into the chat or the Q&A sections, where we'll select several to answer at the end of the presentation. This webinar will also be available on CAMC so that you're able to refer back to it when you need to. So you've probably heard enough from me. For now, I'll let Aaron take the wheel from here. Aaron?
Thanks very much, Roy. I hope everyone can hear me all right. Welcome to today's seminar. We're going to be talking about myth-busting government procurement. So as Roy mentioned, my name is Aaron Ydenberg. I'm with the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises. And it's our role to help suppliers understand the federal procurement process. So it's our job to try and help demystify it, trying to help make it a little simpler and easier to navigate through the federal government procurement process. Obviously, doing business with the federal government, or really any level of government, is not the same as doing business directly with another enterprise or with a customer directly. There's a lot of laws and regulations and policies and procedures and trade agreements and all these different items that sort of dictate how the process must work. But yeah, what our office really tries to do is simplify that process and try and make it as easy and as fast as possible for you, the suppliers, to engage with us and build a strategy that can be successful. Next slide, please. So what we're going to do today, we're going to take about 20 minutes to go through this slide deck, and then we should have half an hour or so for questions. But really what we're going to do, the structure of this talk, is to go through some common myths about government procurement. Some common misconceptions that may make you think that you aren't the right business, that the government isn't the right customer for your business. And what really my objective is today is try and convince you that no, the government is a very good customer, can be a very lucrative customer, provided your business is bid ready. So one of the first things I want to talk about is how much we buy in the federal government. And it's a huge market. We're one of the biggest single buyers in the country. We spend about $25 billion every year buying all the goods and services and construction and maintenance and projects that we need to deliver the services that we deliver to Canadians. So that's $25 billion with a B, over 300,000 contracts, and many of those are actually very small credit card transactions, not necessarily a large, the kind of contract, the shipbuilding contracts and the fighter jet contracts that you might assume. Next slide. The myth that we don't buy from smaller businesses. I think everyone, when they think of government procurement, they think of what they read about in the news. They think about, the IBM contracts and the fighter jet contracts and the shipbuilding contracts that I mentioned already. And yes, of course, we buy those things. We're the country of Canada. We're the federal government. We absolutely, buy those kinds of contracts. But we also buy lots of contracts. In fact, the vast majority of the contracts that we sign are under $25,000. And when they're under that level, we call them low dollar value contracts. And it makes the process a little easier. We'll talk about that sort of in more detail as we get through some of the other slides. But The fact is that the direct purchases that we make from vendors under $10,000, so single contract that's under $10,000, that value adds up to almost $1 billion total. So absolutely, we buy from big businesses, yes, but we also buy from smaller businesses. Next slide. And this slide is really saying the same thing. Of course, yeah, we do business with large companies, but in addition to that, we also buy from any make-up a company that exists. Startups, local businesses, small independent businesses, even down to solopreneurs. We do a lot of work with consultants, solopreneur consultants. At the end of the day, the real sort of lesson here is that we don't care very much what structure your business is. We have a requirement and we need a business to be able to deliver it. And if you can meet the requirements of that tender, if you can deliver what it is that we're looking for, we don't care whether you're a solopreneur or a medium-sized business or a multinational. We just want the best value for taxpayer money. So we're willing to do business with whatever makeup it is, whether it's a co-op business or you're incorporated, or I get people asking me all the time, I'm not a corporation, can I still bid on government work? Absolutely. Next slide. The myth that government doesn't buy from businesses like mine. Again, we are very agnostic to the kind of business that we're buying from. In fact, we believe that we believe in inclusive procurement and that all suppliers must have an equal chance at doing business with us. So that includes, of course, Indigenous businesses, but also women-led and women-owned businesses, minority-owned and minority-led businesses, and persons with disabilities as well. Those are sort of the four underrepresented groups in procurement that were identified by our minister to us and by the Prime Minister to us to try and move the needle on in this current mandate. And you'll often see some tenders that will be restricted to only Indigenous businesses to be able to bid, for example. I wouldn't be surprised in the coming years if we see similar set-asides for women-owned businesses, or extra points available for minority or disability-owned businesses as well in the evaluation. This has been a specific goal of the current government to try and increase the representation from these underrepresented groups in our procurement base. So again, we want to do business with everyone in Canada, with every kind of business that's out there. Next slide, please. Okay, so now let's move from who we want to buy from, which is basically anyone, to what we want to buy. And what I always say here is that the list of things that we don't buy is much shorter than the list of things that we do buy. Of course, again, the typical things that you always think of the government is going to be buying. We're buying, equipment for our military. We're buying technology. We're buying weather stations. All the things that you think of with the government delivering. But there is so much more. The range of what it is that we buy is enormous. Under normal circumstances, before the pandemic, before we were all working from home every day, my office was out at trade shows very often, and we're out talking to businesses, meeting them at their industry events and things like that. And we often have people approach our booth and not really know what we're about. They what is this? This is the government? Like, are you supporting businesses? What are you doing? And we explain that we're there talking about government procurement. And invariably they always say, oh, well, the government doesn't buy what I sell. And they start walking away. And the little game that we like to play is, well, do you want to bet? And, we've had people come up saying, I'm a dog groomer. Well, RCMP owns dogs, Border Services owns dogs. We need to get those dogs clean too. We absolutely buy dog grooming services. I had another woman approach me at a booth one time and say that oh, the government doesn't buy what I sell. I'm a nail tech. I do nails. I'm an esthetician. And I said, okay, yeah, you're probably right that the government doesn't buy nail services. But it was less than a week later, I was looking around on buyandsell.gc.ca, and I saw a tender not for esthetician services directly, but it was for a training program for a women's prison in Saskatchewan to provide like vocational training in how to be a nail tech, so that, you know, once these people were released from prison, they had a vocation, they had a way, you know, to work. Which is a huge predictor of recidivism rates. So the range of what it is that we buy is massive. What I would recommend, and we'll sort of touch on it a little later in the slides as well, is to have a look at our website, buyandsell.gc.ca, and just start plugging into the search bar some names of the service or good that you sell, and see what kind of contracts are out there. That's a great first step to research whether or not the government buys what you sell. Next slide. So this one, I'm not really sure that it is a myth. Government procurement can absolutely be difficult and time consuming. Even just reading through one of our tender notices, for example, can be a 60-page document with a lot of legal language in it. That for a small business, you know, if it's you know, under 10 employees, or you're a solopreneur, or maybe you just have one business partner, you know, just making your way through a 60-page tender document to decide if you want to submit a bid on this, you know, that can be a really significant drain on the amount of hours that you have in a given week. We understand that. We understand that, but the fact is that the process works the way it does because all the activities we're engaging in must be open, fair, and transparent. We must advertise absolutely every bit of information that we could possibly talk about in that tender notice. And that's why they're so long. That's why they wind up being so big. Lots of laws and regulations, Treasury Board policies, our own procurement process. I mentioned free trade agreements that have the force of law as well, or dictating how all this works. But our offices are, what we really try and do at OSME and the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises is try and shrink that decision window, right? Get you to that point where you can look at a tender quickly and decide whether or not this is something that you're interested in bidding on. The first tip I can offer, if you're looking at tender notices, if you're looking at full tender packages and wondering where to start in Annex A. We always put it at the end of these documents, which doesn't make a ton of sense, but that's where you want to start. That's the actual description of the work that we're looking for. So start in the statement of work. If you read through that and that's not what your company does, then don't bother on the other 60 pages of legal mumbo jumbo. There are some initiatives underway to try and make things more accessible and easier. E-procurement is the big one. I have a couple slides about that at the end of the presentation today. But we are starting to move our tender notices into an online platform. Next slide. So government procurement is centralized. Can be a myth, absolutely, but not always. I think the most important point here is the first one on this slide. The government is not a single client. If you're doing research about what customers you might want to be selling to, just considering the federal government as a single client could be a huge mistake. We're over 300 different departments. All, you know, yes, we're all under the umbrella of the federal government of Canada, but we can all be managed independently. And each one of these client departments, each one of these other departments will vary drastically on how centralized they actually are. So for example, RCMP, a very centralized department. You can't just walk into an RCMP branch and start trying to sell them, I don't know, a new bumper for their cars or something like that, right? Like right there at Toronto, or at any given RCMP detachment, they're never going to be making those decisions. That's done from Ottawa, done centrally, and then distributed out to all the detachments. As opposed to Parks Canada, which is a very decentralized department. Each park, each national park is run basically independently. They all do their own procurement. They all do their own management. They do their own hiring. And yeah, the local sort of specificities, the local specifics within that park matter a lot. Large procurements, large complex procurements are managed by my department, PSPC, on behalf of these other departments. So we're basically the business arm of the federal government. Any common business function gets done by us at PSPC. Next slide. So the next two slides here differentiate between competitive procurement and low dollar value procurement. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier that you know, those complex procurement, that's done by my department, by PSPC. When we need to run a big procurement process, PSPC, we're the experts on doing that. And the numbers that you see here on this slide, 25,000 for goods and 40,000 for services. These are really important numbers for you to know or to consider as a supplier when approaching the federal government as a client. Because what these thresholds mean is a split in your strategy. If what we're buying is going to cost more than these thresholds, if we need to buy a bunch of computers, a bunch of goods, and you know, we need to buy 50,000 of them, so it's going to cost in the millions of dollars or in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy these computers. That's above these thresholds, and we must use the competitive procurement process. What does that mean? That means, I think, what most people think of when they think of government procurement. We post a tender on buyandsell.gc.ca. It's a 60-page document. It lists all the requirements of what it is we're trying to buy. It lists all the criteria of how we're going to evaluate your bid against those requirements. It tells you how we want to see your price laid out, and it tells you the rules for how we're going to combine your score on those criteria with your price to make a decision for us, which supplier we're going to select. That's competitive procurement. I'm sure you can appreciate there's an expensive process going on there. There's a lot of our resources internally that are being spent to create that legal document, the tender notice, to post it and host it online, to collect all the bids for 40 days, to evaluate those bids, to communicate the results in English and in French, of course. It's a process. It's a government process, and it moves. It can move slowly. But we can be sure that we're guarding fairness, openness, and transparency throughout that process. When we're buying instead a requirement that is below these thresholds, $25,000 for goods, $40,000 for services, next slide, that puts you in this land. That puts you in low dollar value procurement territory. They are still, I don't want to set up that these are not done competitively, because they are still competitive, but we don't need to use our big, heavy, expensive tendering process. The manager can get 3 quotes on the phone or on websites and decide which supplier has the best value for them, and just simply, they have the authority to make a credit card purchase, and they can just buy that thing right away. The goal, of course, here is to ensure best value for Canadians while enhancing access, competition, and fairness to businesses. Idea being, when what we're buying is below those thresholds, it doesn't make sense to use our big, heavy, expensive procurement process. We can be sure that we're spending money in the most efficient way possible when what we're buying isn't that valuable. So why is this important to you? Because as a business, you need to know what kind of sale you're chasing. Are you chasing a competitive procurement opportunity, something above those thresholds? Is that the kind of contract that your business is set up to deliver best? If so, well, then you're going to need to look for tenders on buy and sell. You're going to need to get good at bidding. You're going to need to, work your price into the most competitive form it can be. Or are you looking to deliver a smaller contract, maybe first, and work your way up to the bigger ones? Are you looking to, because then if that's the case, then you're in low dollar value procurement territory, and it's sort of a good news, bad news situation. Good news being the process will be a lot more familiar to you. It will not be our sort of unique government procurement process. It'll be much more like doing business with another business directly, which means, of course, you have to network, you have to do your research about who they are and what's important to them. But the bad news is that there will be no online repository of all these opportunities. There is no buy and sell list of everything that we're buying in low dollar value procurement. Next slide, please. So I referenced this a little earlier. The best thing you can do, if there were a couple things you could walk away from this seminar and do for yourselves, the first one is to visit buyandsell.gc.ca and find out if the government buys what you sell. So search for the goods and services that you sell. There's a little search bar you can use, but also search your competitors' names as well. We don't only publish tender notices, so what we're going to buy, we also publish award notices and contract history. So you can look back to, I think, 2009 and see the history of every contract we've signed above those thresholds, and see which company won that contract and what their total bid price was. You can also look at the original statement of work and see if that's work that you're interested in doing. That can help you build your client list. That can help you build contacts to reach out to. Can help you build intelligence about what sort of cadence we're buying that good in, who and where those buyers are. And yeah, if you find them, the government could absolutely be a potential client for you. Next slide, please. And if you need help along the way, yeah, reach out to me or my colleagues at the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises. I'm based in Vancouver. I'm working from home in Burnaby right now, but I do have colleagues all across the country. And I think on the next slide, we see some of their offices. But yeah, I mean, what our office does is exactly what you see here. We're out doing seminars. We're out meeting businesses at trade shows. We meet with businesses one-on-one a lot as well. I've talked sort of in general today about the procurement process, but if you want to talk specifically about your business and your industry and try and help develop a strategy for you to sell to government, whether or not it's through those big, heavy, expensive tenders, whether it's through low dollar value procurement, or whether it's through subcontracting opportunities, my colleagues and I can really help define that strategy for you. We also have this fourth feature as well, where we want to hear from you. We want to hear about what barriers you may have experienced, particularly as Aboriginal or minority suppliers. We want to hear about those barriers and where we can feed that into our procurement machine and try and influence policy where possible. So absolutely reach out. I see some questions starting to come in. I just have a couple slides to get through, and then we'll turn over to questions. You want to go to the next slide there, Roy? Yeah, so we have lots of seminars. They're available on buyandsell.gc.ca. You can see our calendar of seminars there. You can also reach out and request a one-on-one meeting with myself or any of my colleagues. We're more than happy to meet. And we have an info line as well. Next slide. There's our offices across the country. But I know like Western, for instance, is not all in Edmonton. They are spread out across those three central provinces. Next slide. And this is just some information about our new electronic procurement solution, which is launching. There's actually going to be an opportunity to submit a fake bid coming up to sort of familiarize yourself with the new system. So it'll be sort of a trial run. If you're at all interested in doing business with the Government of Canada, I would suggest having a look at that. Canada Buys is the new website. Next, I think it's on the next slide. Or you can send an email to that email address there. Oh man, that's a terrible email address. CanadaBuys.ca is the website. And the next slide. Yeah, so we'll open up to a few questions. I know, Roy, maybe you have some extra slides here afterwards for CAMC as well, but we'll move to the questions that are in the chat.
Yes, we will. I can actually read out those questions for you if you'd like. Okay, so from one of our attendees, we actually have a question. Can a minority-owned company based in the US bid and sell from a US-based company? This is asked just because some of CAMC's companies are reciprocally certified with CAMC.
Mm-hmm. So the answer is yes, absolutely. The minority part, first of all, doesn't make any difference. But for US-based businesses, yeah, absolutely. We unless it says specifically that only Canadian-based businesses may apply, which it does in some instances. The recent changes between, normally I would answer this question by talking about NAFTA, which NAFTA said, any projects over $100,000 must be available to American companies and Canadian companies. The new version of NAFTA, CUSMA, has no chapter in it about procurement. So there's kind of this twilight zone a little bit where people don't know exactly what governs it, but the interpretation seems to be that there are no guidelines with respect to procurement. So there is no mandate to be sure that opportunities are available to American companies. However, again, we don't really care what structure your business is, as long as you meet the requirements of the tender. So as long as there isn't anything in the tender that says specifically no, only Canadian businesses may apply, yes, you're absolutely eligible.
Thank you for that. So I see another question in here. This one's actually coming from the chat, so thank you. This one is asking, is the federal government still actively seeking PPE equipment, such as face shields? We're sort of asking this question because, as everyone knows, COVID is still an active scenario. Yeah,
and good question. Another question I get quite often. The way you phrased it, I would say no. Actively seeking PPE equipment such as face shields at the current time, no, it doesn't seem that they are. They have set up a number of tools. There's a specific COVID-19 PPE marketplace, which you can get to from the buy and sell, from the buy and sell homepage. Actually, if I can, do you mind if I just share my screen really quickly and show you the website?
Okay, sure thing. I'll stop sharing over here.
Okay, right on. That's working. It's just PowerPoint that didn't want to work for me.
Oh, lovely.
So can you see my screen right now, the buy and sell?
Yes.
Okay, right on. So we have this big yellow banner up here. The Government of Canada needs products and services in support of Canada's response to COVID-19. And you can click the link to learn how to supply a needed product or service. If you go into there, there's a couple different links, including support for businesses and citizens. But the PPE supply hub here is the new sort of tool that they've propped up to enable people to buy and sell PPE within Canada. So that's not necessarily for selling to the government, but that's us trying to facilitate trade within Canada. to make sure we get that PPE into the hands of the people who need it the most. In terms of the government buying PPE, at the beginning in March, we did have a big call. We had a big call out to businesses, tell us what PPE you can supply. I think there were a very small number of contracts awarded through that process. What they're going back to now is competitive procurement. So what we've seen now since early July, I would say, is tenders posted on buyandsell.gc.ca for non-medical masks, face shields, gloves, things like that. So rather than us just hear from suppliers what you have to sell and start awarding contracts under like the national security exemption, for example, we're going back to standard procurement, exactly what I was talking about. You need to watch for a tender to appear on buyandsell.gc.ca and submit a bid.
Okay, that is lovely. Now, in showing the PPE Hub, we've actually received another question about that. And that would be, is there some direction online that sort of explains the PPE Hub process? Just because some of our suppliers have found it a little bit confusing to use.
I don't know that there is a process to explain. The Supply Hub, and I'll go back to the Supply Hub here. I don't think it's doing anything super sophisticated that requires explanation. You can go in and register yourself as a seller or as a buyer, and you can search the system. So it allows you to put your information up here if you're a seller. You can make your supplies available for sale. You can verify that they meet product specifications. But beyond that, it just makes it available for other people to find you. So it's not like this is a big verification system that we're automatically going to start pulling contracts out of. It's more of a marketing tool. I don't know if that helps answer the question.
I believe it does. Now, I do see a question here asking for your email address, and I just want to let all attendees know Aaron's email will be made available along with the presentation on camc.ca. Now, as we continue to go through questions, I've also seen another one asking about security clearance. And let me see. I've heard you need a security clearance to work for the government. How do I go about getting that?
Yeah, so security clearances are required whenever you're coming into one of our offices, if that ever happens again, or if you're dealing with any of our data. So, often any consultant who's coming in to work with our teams, they would need a security clearance. Any, electrician who's coming into our workplace to change light bulbs or change fixtures or things like that, they would need security clearances. Or any, tech company that's going to work with some of our data would also need security clearances as well. What you need to be able to obtain that security clearance is sponsorship. And what sponsorship means is you have a chance of winning a contract. So you need to find a tender opportunity that you're looking at. That's one of the first things you should always check for. If you've looked through the statement of work and decided, yeah, this is a contract I want to bid on, you should look for what security requirements exist as maybe a first step. And if there is a security requirement, you need to reach out and request sponsorship from the contracting authority. We have to provide the sponsorship to you, and we're only sponsoring companies who are actually looking at active tenders. So it can be a barrier. It can take a lot of time to get through the process, up to 4 months. So start early. It's very, very important that you reach out and make that request for sponsorship early, even if even if this tender isn't exactly the one, or you know you're not actually going to win this specific tender, reach out and request that sponsorship so you can sort of use the tender as a vehicle to get your clearance for the next one that might come out.
Okay. That does end up making some sense. So thank you for sharing your screen in order to show us all of this as well. Now, in terms of other questions here, we're getting quite a few of them in, so I'm glad we have this time. One from one of our attendees is asking, can you give more information on PSAB and DCC, how it relates to small business procurement? There's a lot of hoops to jump through with many different organizations.
Yeah, so you're asking about Defence Construction Canada and the procurement strategy for Aboriginal businesses. So procurement strategy for Aboriginal businesses is the only set-aside program that the Government of Canada currently has. Meaning, in certain circumstances, we will take opportunities to do business with the Government of Canada and say, this is set aside for Indigenous companies. Only Indigenous companies, Indigenous owned and led companies are eligible to bid on this opportunity. And we do that when opportunities meet certain criteria. And the criteria, there's two of them. Number one is Indigenous business capacity exists. We have to know if we're trying to build a road through certain territories. Say, you know, we're adding to a highway. We're doing highway maintenance that runs through a local First Nation. We need to know that there is an Indigenous company out there that can do that work before we will set it aside. And secondly, the outcome of the contract, the outcome of whatever it is that we're buying, needs to be primarily used by Indigenous people as well. So a road through an Indigenous territory is a perfect example. You know, healthcare services in Indigenous territories, perfect example. You know, fisheries studies, things like that, perfect examples. With Defence Construction Canada, they actually have lots of opportunities, again, locally, that they often set aside, I believe, for PSAB. What I can say about PSAB and DCC specifically is that I think they have out right now on buy and sell some advanced procurement notices. So they're for a couple different regions around the country, around some of their bases, they're giving an opportunity to get your security clearance taken care of now and learn about what their plans are for procurement so that you can start sort of eyeing what opportunities you might want to look at. So searching for DCC APN, Advanced Procurement Notice, right now in buy and sell is a great thing to do. I know there's a few out there.
Okay, thank you so much. Now we're going to have the questions be a little bit more fundamental right now. And if you haven't already, or if you have, could you just explain one more time, what identifies a supplier as bid ready? There are a lot of entrepreneurs that end up starting their business, and we've had a few that have become KMC suppliers or are in the process that have essentially started business a few weeks ago.
Sure. So first of all, I want to say bid ready, that's a term that my colleagues and I use, has nothing to do with how successful your business is. It's specifically about how ready you are to go through our process, to go through the federal government's procurement process. And that means, you know, capable of getting your security clearance, you know, a little bit practiced in looking through what's in buyandsell.gc.ca, reading through the information that's there, knowing your industry as well, what sort of requirements we're going to have for your industry, and having those certifications ready to go so that you're able to bid. It's sort of something that we talk about. We're looking to help more businesses become bid ready by learning about how to find the opportunities that are on buy and sell and quickly work through them to see what opportunities might be right for your business. Yeah, there's not a specific definition to it. It's just, yeah, businesses that are prepared and actively sort of looking at government opportunities.
Okay, that ends up helping a lot. I know that that would end up giving a few more of our suppliers a little bit more confidence in thinking whether or not they're ready to bid with the government. So in terms of other questions, we actually do have quite a few of them.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm happy to hang out. So I'm happy to hang out for a little bit past 9 or past noon, I guess, your time. I can answer as many of these questions as I can. I see a few of them that are specific to so like Rain, you've asked a really specific question about the masks tender, the $10 million masks tender. How come government changed their minds after we invest so much time and effort? Yeah, that can be really frustrating. Totally understand. But yeah, watching for amendments is absolutely something you need to do. I'll follow up with you specifically, Rain, because I want to make sure that I give you a specific answer. And don't, not everyone might not be interested in that specific mass tender, but I'll follow up with you specifically.
Thank you. We'll also have all of these questions saved and sent to our panelists so that they're able to get back to you if we're not able to answer them here. So, actually, one of the things that we can do, if possible, is let's go back to the slide regarding minority businesses, just because we have a quick question there asking if disability-owned businesses are on the list as well.
Absolutely. So businesses owned by persons with disabilities there are 4 groups that were identified by our minister as being underrepresented in procurement. And we've been asked to develop strategies to ensure that we're providing information to those groups and breaking down barriers for those groups to participate in procurement. Disability-owned businesses is absolutely on those lists. What I would say that our office has adopted anyway is the principle of nothing about us without us. So when we are hosting events, when we will host events again in the future, I hope, we always provide sign language interpretation at our live events. And we've even made use of some new technology to remote sign language interpretation. And there's a really cool service called IRA that allows, using a smartphone allows blind people or people who have difficulty seeing to navigate around a physical space with their smartphone and a guide in their ears. So those companies themselves are minority owned. And we consult a lot with these communities to try and make sure that we're providing the right services and delivering the right solution so that they can enjoy a barrier-free experience at our events.
Right. This goes back to the Government of Canada being open to all procurement suppliers, correct?
Absolutely.
Lovely. So there is a semi-specific question, but I believe that this would apply for other suppliers. One challenge we often come across is the bundling of tasks. The government typically asks for end result products, and that doesn't allow for the values you've shared to be distributed to the various parts. Is there any way that the government procurement entities check for small business inclusion downstream in, let's say, third-tier services?
Good question. Bundling of tasks, yeah. Doesn't allow for the values you've shared to be distributed to the various parts. I'm not sure I understand exactly what you mean by that, but I think I can answer the question. In terms of small business inclusion downstream in third-tier services, yeah, that's something that we're seeing more and more of now. So like the government signing large management contracts. Maybe I'll use property management as an example. I'm not sure if that's the industry that you're in right now. But so here in BC anyway, we have a large contract with Brookfield Global, BGIS, and they manage all of our office spaces. So the actual contractors who come in, the small business contractors who come in to change the light bulbs and manage the elevators and clean the kitchens and things like that, they aren't signing contracts with us, the federal government. They're signing contracts with BGIS. Shipbuilding contracts are another really good example. What I will say is that, yes, they have responsibilities to make use of Canadian small businesses within their supply chains. Do they always meet those responsibilities? No. But we're getting better and better and better at giving our contracts teeth to ensure that they're still meeting those obligations. A really good example is the Park Casino that was built. So it's actually a municipal contract, not federal, but it's gained a lot of attention the way they managed it. So there's a new casino here in Vancouver that there was some requirements around how much about labor. So 30%, I believe it's Indigenous. They need to maintain like 30% Indigenous employment at a bunch of different levels of employment. So not just, the people on the floor, but in management roles as well. And their occupancy permit is specifically tied to that. So they can't backslide on that now that things built, or their occupancy just gets revoked. So there's lots of new ways that we're sort of building that into contracts and trying to ensure that those dollars flow down to local small businesses as well.
Okay. So actually a bit of a follow-up to that is, so certain small businesses, when it comes to bid opportunities, if they don't necessarily meet the end result product, but they have part of what that bid is asking for, can they still go for the bid, or would it be smarter for them to, let's say, collaborate with another supplier in order to reach that end result?
Yeah. So if you don't meet the requirements of a bid, of a tender, submitting a bid is useless. If you don't, like, the way that our process is set up, criteria is criteria is criteria. It must be transparent. Therefore, we can't just change our criteria and accept you because we really like your solution. If it doesn't meet the criteria, it can't be accepted as a bid. Joint ventures are something we love, actually. We love seeing companies come together and submit a joint venture. And actually we have, if you look at, I'll just go into, so our list of new tenders, we're looking at everything that's new today. We'll just pick the first one. Underground infrastructure repairs, rental services with operator. So right here, right at the top on the right, there's this section that says find out who is interested in this tender.
Would you like me to stop sharing my screen?
Oh, sorry, we're still looking at your screen. Sorry about that.
Yes.
Just go back.
So we can switch on over to you.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Thanks, Roy. Okay, so here's a tender search. So this is just the brand new tenders that came out today. Here's one for underground infrastructure repairs and heavy machinery rental services. So here's the tender notice page. We see exactly when it's going to close, when it's open. Right here on the right, there's this find out who is interested in this tender section. The whole point of this section is to facilitate joint ventures. Maybe you're an operator, but you don't have the heavy machine that they're actually looking for right here in this. You don't own this machine. But if you could collaborate with another business who does own the machine or has access to the machine, but doesn't have an available operator, well, now you can bid together. Again, like I was saying about the solopreneurs, co-op, structure your business, we really don't care. You can be a joint venture. You can, submit one bid as one company, but you're working with a bunch of subcontractors. I saw a question in there about how big a medium-sized enterprise is. That goes up to 499 employees. So 500 and over is a large business. But yeah, we publish this list, and any business can put their name on the list. And again, it's an advertising, it's a marketing tool to try and help find another business. I was working with a client a year or so ago now who was a trainer, delivered, he did some training in media relations. And there was a perfect opportunity for him. It was exactly the kind of work that he's an expert in. But he's here in Western Canada and he doesn't speak French. And the requirement was for a national training program. And of course, we're the federal government. So every employee has to be able to take that training program in English or in French. So he was, initially he was really upset because this was the perfect opportunity for him to knock out of the park. But working with him, he was able to find someone in Quebec who had enough experience being a trainer, wasn't a trainer specifically in the topic that my client excelled in, but they were able to submit a joint bid together just with this other person covering that one bit of the requirement. And they did that through this tool here.
That's amazing. So then you're able to connect suppliers even across Canada for certain bids, just because you're able to see
everything we're doing is about trying to increase competition. If there's only one business that submits a bid, well then, first of all, we can't be sure that what we're getting is really very good quality. And secondly, they can set whatever price they want. And that's not ideal for, value for taxpayer money. So the whole point of why my office exists and a lot of the features that are on these websites is to try and increase competition.
Okay. So I do see that the time says that we have about 5 more minutes for the webinar itself. I will send you all of these questions, Aaron, but I believe that means that we have time for 2 more. So one that I've been seeing coming up from specific suppliers is asking about not hearing back regarding specific bid opportunities. So could you give us a bit of a timeline there on how long it does end up taking?
Yeah. So patience. number one thing when working with the government, we take a long time. And I get this question from suppliers all the time. Hey, I submitted a bid 3 weeks ago. I haven't heard anything. I'd really like to know what I did wrong. First of all, if you haven't heard for 3 weeks, that's nothing in government timelines. like these, I know there were a couple questions about the mask tender, for example, that were submitted back in June, and you still don't have results for it. I know that's frustrating, especially when we have really tight delivery timelines specified in the tender. Honestly, expected timelines between when a tender notice closes and when we actually award the contract can be, easily 3 to 4 months. And why is that? Is because we're doing lots of stuff with respect to fairness, openness, and transparency. We have to receive all of those bids. We have to evaluate all those bids. And we do that by committee too. That's not just one person. Those bids have to get evaluated. If there's any disagreement on the evaluation, we're going to keep arguing until we get consensus. And then we have to prepare notices for all those suppliers. So I promise you, you will hear. If you haven't heard anything yet, it's because they have not yet published any results or they're not yet ready to advertise results. When you do hear, you're going to hear one of 3 things. You're going to hear either, congratulations, we're recommending you for contract award, here's next steps. You're going to hear, we regret to inform you that your bid was responsive, meaning you met all of the criteria, you met all the requirements, but we're not recommending you for contract award. And that could be because another supplier scored higher than you in technical merit, or because they beat you on price, or both. And you could hear a third thing. You could hear, we regret to inform you that your bid was non-responsive, meaning you did not meet criteria. In any of those three circumstances, you will be offered a debrief meeting. You will be offered the opportunity to debrief your results. Take that meeting. Even if it's just by email, even if it's just sort of communication back and forth, they will tell you either, which criteria it was that you missed and what they were looking for, or where you lost points on some of your criteria. They won't be able to tell you any specifics about the bid that won, other than perhaps the total value of their bid. And because that's public knowledge, that's going to be posted on buy and sell in the award notice later on anyway. But yeah, they're going to be talking about your bid specifically. They won't say this other guy beat you because he did this, 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 and this, and you didn't do that. That won't be what they say. They'll say the criteria stated we needed to see a full strategy with risks identified. And you did not identify any risks, so you lost points there. That's the kind of information you're going to get in a debrief meeting. If you'd like to take issue with what they said, you can debate them, but the only leg you can stand on is if the information was in your bid and they missed it. There is no opportunity there to provide any new information. You can't say, oh, but we talked about that. You know that that I have that certification. If you didn't put it in your bid, they can't include it in their decision.
Okay, that does end up making a lot of sense. And actually, it is nice to hear that suppliers do have that chance to sit down and get that debrief meeting. It sort of means that if another bid opportunity comes up in the future, they know how to rectify any issues that they've had in the past.
Exactly. If you approach that meeting with the attitude of how can I improve my next bid, the contract officer will be really helpful and you'll get a lot out of it. If you approach it as I can't believe you didn't give me this contract, then their defenses are going to go up and they're worried about getting sued and litigation and all that sort of thing, and they will clam up and not share very much. But the more you can approach it as an opportunity to improve your bid for next time, the more you'll get out of those debrief meetings.
Okay, well, that is perfect to know. So I did originally say 2 more questions, but I think that will be our last one for today. I'd like to thank Aaron again for presenting to our audience and thank all of our attendees for participating. Before we conclude, I'd like to just take a moment just to talk about our upcoming events and opportunities. Our next webinar, Procurement Needs for the Natural Resources Sector, will be September 29th, and you can visit kmc.ca or contact myself or Vandana for more information using our emails on the screen. So another resource available for our suppliers is from TechNation. So TechNation, Canada's National Tech Industry Association, and Shared Services Canada are working together to address the federal government's endeavor to drive a more modernized procurement approach through challenge-based procurement. TechNation has launched an open business intelligence platform called the Tech2Gov Digital Marketplace. It is open to all incorporated technology companies in Canada to register and showcases all areas of technology specialization and experience. The digital platform allows for a fast and non-cumbersome vendor procurement bid process and a 12-month view into government-required industry solutions. To sign up and for a little bit more information, you can access the digital platform from KMC's website under Resources. While facing a year like no other, KMC will continue to ensure we're providing you the most important information and development as well as support tools. If you have an idea for a webinar, you can contact me by phone or email, and we can discuss where it might fit into our future schedule for events. And finally, I'd like to once again thank our webinar sponsors, EY, Flexingate, Magna, Nutrien, Prasad Employment Law, and RBC. With your support, CAMC will continue to bring supplier development to the network by as many mediums as possible. Thank you all for attending today, and have a lovely Tuesday.
Thanks, Roy. Thanks, everybody, for attending. Have a great day.